Hello and welcome to the very first, well, I guess officially, the very second episode of the A-10 Insider Podcast. My name is Rob Dauster. I'm joined here by, I'm going to call him my employee today. I'm going to call him my employee, Jeff Goodman. He's my co-host here. We are part of the Field 68 Media Network. The show is sponsored by our partners over at Bet River Sportsbook, and we're breaking down the Atlantic 10, Jeff. We're here. It's finally here, the first episode, the first real episode, because I spent 4 hours with you last week. Talking at Atlantic 10, talking to every coach. It wasn't brutal, but it was
it was brutal having to be next to you for 4 hours. Seeing the coaches was phenomenal. But Fana at least was smart enough to take a 20-minute bathroom break or whatever he took. I never left for 4 straight hours.
He said I had to take a call.
I know. No, we know Fana's bladder. We know how Fana's bladder is. So,
so I just, before we kind of get into the meat of this, and what I want to do today is kind of, before we get into this interview with Anthony Grant, I do want to just talk through, we didn't really have a chance to talk through what the preseason poll looked like, some of the preseason all conference teams and where we agree and disagree with it. But before we do that, I just want to set the table for why we're doing this podcast and why we're doing this show. We had opportunities with other conferences to be able to do this. Part of the reason why our first partnership is with the Atlantic 10, the major reason why is, one, I think the conference has a group of very passionate and large fan bases that matter, right? That are looking for a level of coverage that doesn't exist right now for the Atlantic 10. And it is what it is, because it's not the SEC, and you don't have the football conference overlap, right? You don't have necessarily blue bloods, but there is a large, passionate fan base that cares about this conference. And two, the league is good this year, Jeff. The league is really, really good. There are 3 teams at the top that are with guys coming back that have a chance to, I think, win the league. That doesn't include Loyola stepping in, who, look, they've won at a high level for the last 5 years. They are what they are. I think Davidson, I think Richmond, I think George Mason. You got UMass bringing in Frank Martin. You got Rhode Island bringing in Archer. There are storylines everywhere in this league as well. So it's an interesting conference. It's going to be one that's fun to cover. It has a fan base that matters. And it's the bottom line is this, like, this is the kind of league that needs to get more attention if college basketball is going to be what we want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, and let's give credit here where credit is due. Archie Miller, a Field of 68 alum, was integral in getting this done as well, in pushing for the A-10 to do this partnership, and pushing for us to work with the A-10. And it is a league that I think, slips through the cracks, and at times it has deserved to, and at times it has deserved to get a lot more attention. And like you said, I think with the additions of some really good coaches, Archie Miller, Frank Martin, Chris Caputo, Matt McKillop, Fran Dunphy coming back. There's been a lot of changes in the league, and we're really going to highlight them this year. Fan is going to come on and help us out as well. And but there's a lot, and the other part for us is proximity. You live in Philly. I live in Massachusetts. I'm a couple hours from Frank Martin and Archie Miller, and I'm going to be up at one of Frank's first games, November 10th. They play Towson in what's going to be an absolute war between Pat Scarry and Frank Martin, and I'll be at that game. I'm going to try to see some other games and get to URI and get to a Dayton game this year if I can. But I think the league, they have great coaches, and again, underrated.
Yeah, there are a lot of great storylines, and to me, there's a lot of interesting angles and different places that we can go with this with a pretty quick preview. I want to start with you. Dayton is picked to win the league, right? They were picked to win the league by our Almanac writer Kai McKeon, who from 3-Man Weave. The Almanac, 1999. You can go buy it. Most extensive coverage you can get for college basketball this season.
Here's how extensive it is. Yeah, this is how extensive it is, baby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's the Encyclopedia Britannica of college basketball. Dayton, it really is. Like anything.
Does anybody even know what Encyclopedia Britannica is that's listening?
Yeah, well, people that are your age do. The Dayton Flyers were everyone's picking them to win the league.
Yeah.
Why them over St. Louis? right? You look at what St. Louis is bringing back. You look at the guards that they have on that team. You look at that home court arena that they have, the home court advantage. You look at who they are getting back from injury. You look at who they got transferring in from Missouri, right? There is a lot of talent on that roster. Why Dayton over St. Louis? And do you agree with it?
I think you go either way. I mean, I think with Dayton, it was almost like a little bit of a novelty, right? A little bit of a like, whoa, look at what they did last year. Look at what the Ant did last year with a young team and a young front line that nobody expected to do anything. You know, people thought they'd be middle of the pack in the league. So I think it's almost like you're seeing how well he did and how good he was a few years ago when he had a kid named Obi Toppin. Yep. And they had a chance to go deep in the NCAA tournament that year. And you're just seeing like how quickly he was able to revamp this roster and saying to yourself, the upside with this group is so high, right? I mean, obviously Deron Holmes is a absolutely special talent.
He's not bad.
He's special.
My sources are telling me that he's a good basketball player. Goodman.
He's really good. But St. Louis returns everybody. And obviously they bring back, you know, a guy that, you know, averaged 17 a game in Perkins 2 years ago. So I think Travis, when he was talking to us at Media Day, the big thing for him was obviously defense, but also like accepting roles because Perkins was the guy and now he comes back in and he'll still be a guy, but he doesn't need to be the guy anymore. So I think you could go with either one of those two. And they were pretty close. I mean, Dayton got 22 first place votes. St. Louis got 7. Clearly, Dayton's the favorite right now. I don't think St. Louis minds that.
No, I don't think that they do either. And if I'm putting my money on it, if I'm going to betrivers.com and I am betting on who I think is going to win the A-10, it would be very difficult for me not to click St. Louis, right?
Really?
Yes, I think so. Just because
I think it's health. I think it comes down to health.
Yeah, Rob. I mean, but that's what it is for everything. And again, we're splitting hairs here, right? This is going to be the kind of thing where one team is going to have 3 losses and one team is going to have 4 losses because they weren't able to close out one game on the road at like VCU or something like that. So we're talking about the difference of probably like 5 possessions all season long, right? Who wins more close games between those two? I would just look, point guard play, right? Guard play, right? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how. Right. No, and here's an honest question for you. How many perimeters, how many backcourts are better than what St. Louis has nationally? Yuri Collins, Gibson Jimerson, who, by the way, averaged 17 points a game last season, right? They get Javonte Pickett back. He averaged 17 points a game 2 years ago, and he's old. You bring in Javonte Perkins. You bring in Javon Pickett from Missouri, who averaged double figures there. You still got Fred Thatch coming off the bench who can play guard anywhere 1 through 5. Right. Yeah. Francis Okoro really came on down the stretch last season. I'll
say this.
I'm buying the Billikens.
I think Dayton and St. Louis can match up with almost anybody in the country. You know, there's probably a half dozen teams that are so talented at the top that are going to be a step ahead of everybody else. After you get through those, I could see St. Louis and Dayton again being there with anybody.
Yeah, they're Sweet 16 teams in my mind.
Yeah.
They can make it that far. And I will give the A-10 endless credit. I love the idea of their Friday night games, the national games, being able to have kind of a standalone window. They made Dayton, I think it's Dayton at St. Louis is the final game of the regular season that Friday, which like one, that's going to be great. 2, there's going to be I want nothing more than both of those teams to have identical records going into that game. So the winner wins the Atlantic 10 regular season title. The basketball gods can give me one thing.
All right, so we need to make a pact. If that happens, we got to try to do a show from there. If that game determines who wins the regular season title, you and I have to do all we can, unless there's something else that prohibits us from being able to do it, to get there and do a show from that game.
We might have to. we might have to, Jeff.
Pretty good. Be pretty good.
If we go, here's the thing. If we go, you're going to have to pronounce the St. Louis Arena on air because I know how to say it now. I had a St. Louis fan teach me. I know how to say it. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to make you have to do it on air by yourself because I don't think that you can do it. All right. VCU's picked 3rd by the coaches. Loyola's picked 4th. I think it's pretty pretty clear cut that those are going to be the next two teams. I think that's pretty close to a consensus, right?
I mean, no, I don't think so at all. I don't think we know. That's the beauty of this league. After the top 2 or 3, I think Loyola Chicago, there's so many still questions that Drew Valentine's got, right? A new league. Mm-hmm. He lost a ton. Sure, he's got talent. He loves St. Thomas, his young sophomore forward. But they've got a lot of question marks, right? Davidson. How are we writing Davidson off, right? Like, I know they got a new coach.
Davidson lost.
They lost a lot.
Too many.
So did Loyola.
Too many important pieces, right?
So did Loyola. Hey,
yeah,
Richmond's got one of the best players in the league in Tyler Burton, like super talented. I mean, they lost a ton too. So you got Loyola lost a lot, Davidson lost a lot, Richmond lost a lot. We don't know with UMass what Frank's got right now. I think URI is going to be in a rebuilding mode. St. Bonaventure, still the most amazing stat, if that's true, that Mark Schmidt gave us on A-10 Media Day.
Do you remember it? Yeah, it's true. They bring back 4 points and 2 rebounds. That's not what they average. That's total. 4 points and 2 rebounds from last season. They lost 99.5% of the minutes played.
I don't think we've ever seen anything like that.
Never.
Well, actually, we did. UT Martin lost their entire team a few years ago.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. I would tend, because of the home court advantage that VCU has, I would tend to say that I would think you got to have them third, right?
Yeah. After that, I'm going VCU 3.
You're right about Loyola. Like, I think Loyola ended up getting the 4th spot because of the name brand, right? Because of who they are. Drew's really good. And,
George Mason.
Yeah. Right. So I'm going to talk about George Mason, because I do think that George Mason is the kind of team that is probably going to win a couple games that they shouldn't win, probably lose a couple games that they shouldn't lose. But when it comes to like high upside and like how dangerous they are, they have a lot of guys that can shoot. They may have the most talented player in the conference in Josh Aduro, who's like a matchup problem at his size and athleticism and ability to shoot. My only thing, we don't know what's going to happen at the point guard spot. And like, especially at this level, especially when you're dealing with teams that can guard the way that some of these teams in this,
you know where I stand with point guards.
Yeah, it matters. You need a good point guard, and I think they're going to start Devin Dinkins at the point.
Yeah,
he's a freshman coming in. That's a big ask. So that is my concern with George Mason.
Yeah, and again, when we're looking at the top teams, to me, you're looking at having a stud. And Aduro is a stud, right? So he can put you in there. You kind of need, to me, to have a chance to win the league, you need a first team all league guy, a caliber guy. And Dayton's got it. St. Louis might have multiple ones. Obviously, VCU's got Ace Baldwin. I don't know if Loyola has one of those. I think they've got balance as much as anything. And again, Foster Loyer, man. That was one of the surprises in the country last year for me.
Yeah. I mean, we had heard that he was a killer from everybody in Michigan State. It just, he's at the right level now, right? Like when you're at the Big Ten, there's a certain athleticism and length that you need. And I think that kind of coming to where he is now is a better fit for him. All right. I want to ask you about UMass, because I think if I had to take one team out of that top 7, or one thing, take away that top 7. If you had to pick one team that's not in that top 7 that we just talked about, who can make a run? I think it's UMass. I think the fact that they're bringing in the Levette kid from South Carolina, who like Frank raves about him.
Well, because he knows what to expect. He's tough. He's tough.
And he knows the impact that he can have anchoring a defense. Just being large and in the way is something that Frank Martin values, and that dude can be large and in the way. Noah Fernandez, really talented point guard coming back. And they bring in Rasul Diggins, who was a top 50 recruit and the Philly Player of the Year in the city of Philadelphia in his senior year in high school. Like that, there is a player there. There's a talent there. And I think that getting him into a new situation, UConn transfer, is probably the best thing for him. I think UMass has a chance to be good.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Frank's obviously got a huge personality. We know that. Incredibly well liked within the industry. And it doesn't work for everybody, right? I mean, like Frank Martin doesn't work for every kid. But I think between the UMass brand and there's still some brand there. It's not what it used to be, obviously, but there's still a strong brand there. If they win at a high level, it's a tough place to play. And to me, again, you got his ability to recruit, right? Like he's going to get players to Amherst that other coaches, just including Derek Kellogg, who played there, couldn't get. He's not getting maybe Marcus Camby or Lou Rowe or those guys, but he's going to be able to recruit at a higher level than a lot of people have done at UMass, whether it's Travis Ford, whether it's Derek Kellogg, whether it's Matt McCall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And I the one thing I will say is I think he has an ability to get guys, even if they aren't necessarily Frank Martin players, at the very least, especially early on, to get them to buy in. And you know what'll help? Winning games. You get a couple W's on that board. Yeah. You start playing a little bit better. You see your numbers go up a little bit. I think that'll convince you like, hey, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. The best way to deal with a overbearing coach is to have a lot of success. So,
but are you calling Frank overbearing?
I mean, is that not a thing?
Oh my!
Imagine
boy,
being
all I know is, listen, next offseason when we get you down there and you go through practice, I'm going to tell him you called him overbearing, and he is not going to take it easy.
And you know what he's going to say? Yeah, that's probably a good scout.
And then he's going to say, get your ass
on the line. There. You got suicide. Start running.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. As long as I don't have Fanta in my way when I'm trying to pivot down there, all right? We don't need any more bloody noses, okay?
I'm just going to have a bucket waiting for you because you're going to need it at the end.
Look. I'm in pretty good shape right now. I just PR'd yesterday on the Peloton. Right, I just PR a 30-minute ride. I PR'd.
Impressive. Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty. I'm not in my prime yet. I'm not in my prime. No. I'm still carrying a little bit of last year's holiday weight, right? Like we're not going to talk about specific LBs right now, but I'm feeling good.
You were 260 at one point. You were 260, weren't you?
Come on, 240. I was 240. I got down to 225. Then March hit, and we went to New Orleans for the Final Four, and
it all came back. New Orleans.
It all came back. Look. I love the food in New Orleans. How do you not love the food in New Orleans?
Listen, to me, Final Four in New Orleans every year. So the only problem is you and I may not make it. If we try to do the Final Four every year in New Orleans, I don't know how many years I'd have left.
No, we need, having it in Houston this year is going to be good. But every once in a while, you need to have the Final Four in a place where they tell you to go home at a certain time.
Yeah,
that's
very true. Very
wrong. Yes. I don't even know where we were. All right, so preseason player of the year, DaRon Holmes. Is that where you are with it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, usually you go with the best player on the best team. Again, I don't know. Yuri Collins is terrific. I just don't know. To me, I almost feel like St. Louis, they're going to have too many guys. They're going to have great balance and a different guy every night. Where to me, DaRon Holmes is going to be the guy for Dayton. He's going to take a jump, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be such a fun league, to be honest. And I think the one thing was from A-10 Media Day, Rob, how much I enjoyed being around all these coaches. Seriously.
There are fantastic personalities in this. Yes. So I don't know how many people outside of Philly know how funny and how entertaining Fran Dunphy is. Billy Lang, great dude. I'd never really had
and he was real.
Great dude.
Billy Lang
stories.
There was no bullshit.
Keith Dambro. Yeah. Awesome. I'd never sat down and had a long conversation. Awesome guy to talk to. Yeah. Arch. Now that he's done his field of 68 duty and like he's more open with the media, maybe just us. One thing I thought was funny about Arch is like when you would ask him about his team, he'd get all serious and he'd kind of talk quiet like this and he'd make his point. And then you ask him about Fanta and he'd be like, oh, Fanta, you remember that time he was drinking a Miller Lite on camera? Like became really animated. So maybe we just need to ask more coaches about Fanta.
And again, like, it's funny. One guy that I don't think people know well enough is Anthony Grant.
Yes.
Like, I just don't think people understand. I've known Ant since I remember, and we'll talk to him in a bit here when I was at Dayton. But, I remember when I first met him, it was back when I first jumped into the business. He was kind of youngish as an assistant at Florida, and you are not going to find a better human being than Anthony Grant. And, he went through a lot, obviously, this past off season. And we obviously respect his privacy. And, but man, he's the best. And watching him do what he's done at his alma mater and get them back.
What I think is the most impressive?
Go ahead.
He had this unbelievable season, right? This dream season that I don't even think the most diehard Dayton fans could ever imagine, and have it just wiped away, have it just completely blown up by a fucking epidemic, right? By a pandemic. Within 2 years, he's able to get Dayton good enough where they make a run at being a tournament team last season, right? And now bring everybody back from that group, including a potential pro in Deron Holmes, and be able to enter a season where, like, if you can make a very strong argument they should be a preseason top 25 team this year. You make a very strong argument, right? So the ability to turn it like this and get it back after losing that, I can't imagine that was easy for him to deal with. I know it wasn't easy for Dayton fans to deal with. So before we get into that interview, I just want to finish up real quick. For the Almanac, our first team was Yuri Collins, Ace Baldwin, Tyler Burton, Deron Holmes, Josh Aduro. For the Atlantic 10, throw Foster Lawyer into that mix as well. They went with Dauster math, 6 players on the first team, which, I know we're partners with the Atlantic 10 on this. I don't know if I can co-sign that, Jeff.
I know. What's with 6?
I didn't know. Did you know that in the Atlantic 10 you played with 6 players on the team? 6 players.
No, I didn't know that was allowed. I didn't know. We're gonna have to talk about Drew about this new rule. That
I know we got to. Why? How come no one talked to us about being able to have 6 players on the court at one time?
At least it's better than I think the Big Ten has like 16 on their first.
The SEC has 8 players on their first team. And
it's just come on, cut it. 5. That's all we need.
Go 4 teams if you want to reward extra players, but give us 5. There's 5 players on the basketball court. Give us 5. All right. So do you have any issues with any of that? I think those are clear cut, the 6 best players in the conference.
No, I have zero issues with it whatsoever. I think it's the way to go in this league right now. And man, those 5 players, 6 players are all really, really good. I can't wait to do this pod this year. I think we're going to give you some, again, I think what we're going to do, we're going to give you information, right, that you can't get other places. We're also going to kind of peel back the curtain on some of these coaches because we know them well. So we're going to show you sides of them, hopefully, that you really haven't seen before. I mean, listen, I don't know how many people saw the side of even Frank Martin, who shows a funny side at times, but I don't know how many, you saw the A-10 show we did. We could have went for another half an hour easy.
He could have hosted it.
Yeah.
He could have hosted it. And I think that's the value with what we can bring. More than like this is just big picture. It's not just this podcast, right? It's overall. I think that there is, and probably rightfully so, the thought that Frank Martin is like a really intense, kind of scary human being, right? When like at the end of the day, he's actually really funny and like really outgoing and he's up there with the
my daughter. Listen, my daughter still says Talia interviewed him during the pandemic and again this past year, and she's like he's my favorite interview. And she's interviewed, well, other than Scott Drew. Nobody's catching Scott Drew from her. But she loves Frank. And that's the one thing. Once you get to know Frank Martin, he is kind of like a big teddy bear. I mean, he is.
Yep. Same thing with Archie Miller. I think that when you get him,
he's not a big teddy bear.
He's not a big teddy bear, but when you get him out of his shell, he's
like a little teddy bear. He's like a little one.
Yeah, a little teddy bear. But like Drew at Loyola, really good dude. Kimmy, really good dude. Chris Caputo, really good. Like you can go down the list. There's a lot of really good personalities.
We know these guys well.
I think that's the advantage that we can bring. So with that in mind, let's get into that interview with Anthony Grant. Goodman went to Dayton and was able to sit down with him. We're going to run that right now.
We're dropping our merch.
We got to start calling Underwood Daddy Brad. I'm a big pod guy.
Breaking news. The Field of 68 has an online store, and it's your one-stop shop for the latest and greatest merch in college basketball and college football. You can find shirts to support your favorite team, make fun of your rival team, or boast Field of 68 catchphrases like Daddy Brad, Cussin' and Discussin', and the Star Heels. Go to www.fieldof68.shop today and enter promo code TOUCHDOWN for 20% off at checkout.
All right, Jeff Goodman here with Anthony Grant, Dayton head coach, and it's good to be here.
Jeff, good to see you, man. Always.
It's always good to see. Hey, listen, people don't know our relationship and how long it dates back.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. Do you remember who we were watching?
Oof.
Standing courtside years and years
man.
ago?
Your memory's better than mine.
No, my memory sucks. but my memory with you is very good. Darrell Wright.
Oh, yeah.
When he blew up.
Was that ABCD camp?
I think it was on in Houston, maybe
Houston,
like Kingwood or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
So
I remember
knew
that
you
process
before.
of recruiting him.
Both of us had no gray. I didn't have any gray here. You didn't have any gray. And
Yeah, I got a few gray hairs
yes, me too. Good to see you, and obviously this team this year a little bit different than last year. You brought in a lot of new faces. Had probably no idea what you were dealing with this time of year. At least now, I feel like have a pretty good feel for this group and where it is.
Yeah, I mean, we had one of the youngest teams in the country last year, and I thought from the beginning of the year to the end, we had a lot of experiences, some good, some bad, but we got better. Obviously didn't reach the goal that we set in terms of, making the NCAA tournament and winning a conference championship. But I think the experience of last year will pay dividends for us moving forward. It's still early in the year, but you can see at this stage, the guys are a lot more familiar with what they have to do, both offensively and defensively, and how they want to do it. So last year at this time, we were still trying to figure it out. Didn't really know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
We had to go through some games to try to figure that out. But yeah, you can see the maturity of this group being a little different than where we were last year. We've got a couple of new faces that we've added as well that are in the process of learning, our culture, our language, the whole deal. But for the most part, the veterans are doing a good job of leading.
You remember what you were thinking last year when you went out that early stretch?
Yeah.
UMass Lowell, Lipscomb. It was not great early.
Yeah.
I know you're pretty even keel. So my guess is you didn't panic too much, but still, it had to be.
Yeah,
a
Jeff.
little bit
I
trying.
mean, I think that was the first week of the season, and for me, it was more about figuring out how this team needed to play in order to be successful. We had, again, as you mentioned, we had a lot of new faces. For me, it was more of I felt like we were better than what we were showing in that first week. So just figuring out how we needed to play to be able to showcase that, and then, really figure out the personnel and how to put them in position to be the best version of themselves. So, sometimes that takes time to build, and I think we, over the course of the season, started to figure it out and gel and understand roles and all that comes with every season. So yeah.
Do you feel like it's almost unfair because, again, early season Dayton was not very good, and it cost you an NCAA tournament bid, realistically?
Well, I mean,
losses.
I can see how you would say that. I thought the first three games, especially for us not being a Power 5 school, those games are critical early in the year. And sometimes if you have a bad week, you have a couple of bad games, it could haunt you for the rest of the season. I think because of the fact that we went from that and then we go down to Orlando and we win the Disney tournament, and then we have a level of success throughout, we put ourselves in a better situation. Honestly, I think some of what we did toward the end of the season maybe hurt us more than what happened at the beginning of the season, because we did have a pretty good stretch there where we were playing good basketball and having success. But unfortunately, we let a couple of drop that we just couldn't afford to, and it hurt us.
Durham was terrific last year. I don't know if you expected even him to come that quickly as a freshman. Usually you see a steeper learning curve sometimes, and it takes more time than it did with him. What do you see this year him taking the jump? What have you been on him about?
Yeah, well, I think last year, Deron, like all of our first-year freshmen, kind of got thrown to the fire a little bit in terms of what they went against. And, his first 3 or 4 games of college basketball, he was going against grown men, 22, 23-year-old guys that have been in their 5th or 6th year of college, and so that was, trial by fire, so to speak. And I think, but at the end of the day, it made him better. He learned from it, and that's probably his biggest quality is that he's got a strong drive and desire to excel, to be really good, and combined with great humility. So, I think the experiences of last year, understanding, what it was going to take for him to be successful and then going out and having success. So I think his confidence, the fact that he is now experienced in college basketball, I think that'll be, will pay dividends for him, will reap benefits for him. But, sometimes one of the hardest things to do is that sophomore campaign, having gone through it. So, I sit here today, whatever it is, September 22nd, and say that, the approach will be the same in terms of what we try to get him to understand is, just come in every day and continue to try to get better and stay humble and do what you've been gifted and blessed to be able to do.
Experience obviously is the difference from last year overall to this year's team.
Yeah.
What else will we see differently out of this group, do you think? I mean, anybody made a major jump? Anything you're going to try to do differently now that they've got a year of experience that maybe you weren't comfortable doing with that group last year?
Yeah, I would say at this stage, Jeff, it's really hard to say that. I think what I'm able to do now is we're ahead of where we were a year ago now as we get ready to open up regular practice next week. So, knock on wood, we're healthy and we can move forward. I think we'll find out a lot quicker about what we're capable of doing than maybe a year ago.
What does being here mean to you? I mean, again, like this is where you grew up, right? I mean, winning here and the pride you have in this program, and we know what this community is all about with the Dayton Flyers. But even a couple years ago, what you did and weren't able to see it to the finish line because of the pandemic, and getting this program back as quickly as you did, when a lot of people thought, again, you were so young last year. I don't think anybody expected you to even be on the bubble. Just what does it mean?
Yeah, well, Jeff, I came here as a 17-year-old kid, out of Miami, Florida, and didn't know what I didn't know, and so, you look back at that time and my experience as a player here, and I kind of grew up, here, and just the love and support that I got. So to me, having the opportunity to come back and kind of be the steward of the program, it's an honor to me. It's great. I love it. This community, this university. Our administration, we're really, really fortunate. And I tell people all the time, I've got the fortunate. I've been to other places. I've been, around the country, and I've seen a lot. And sometimes when you're in something, you kind of can take it for granted. So I've been blessed that I've been other places, and that's the one thing I don't take for granted. What we have here is pretty special. It's a fun place to be, and certainly being an alum myself, it's a different feel.
I want to know 17-year-old Anthony Grant.
Yeah.
What was he like? Because I know
Jeff, let me just say it this way. I'm so happy we didn't have camera phones and social media back in that
Come
day.
on, you did things wrong? Really?
Thank goodness we didn't have camera phones and social media.
Would have been trouble for all of us.
No question.
Lot worse now than it is. These kids have so much more to deal with, and the new college basketball right now. I mean, so much has changed so quick. Like NIL, the portal. Now, luckily, this year you don't have to deal with as much roster turnover. Do you like where college basketball is headed? I mean, I think we all have kind of resigned ourselves and like part of the fact that, hey, kids are getting paid. You played, and you probably would have made some money, back in the day, 50 years ago when you were here. But do you like, what do you like about where college basketball is headed, and what worries you about it?
I would say, the progress in terms of player empowerment, I think is positive. But it's like anything else. The unintended consequences of some of this, I think we could see. I'm concerned that there could be damage done to set the game back, to set the athletes back long term because of some of that. But hopefully, we'll have smart enough minds that we will be making the decisions and, make the adjustments that you need to make. One of my concerns is just with the legislation, just with transfer rules, just the graduation rates, and we won't see that for another 4 or 5 years. How it impacts. Well, again, I don't want to sit here and act like I can predict the future, but I know 20, 25 years ago, it was problematic that you weren't seeing college athletes, specifically minorities, graduating from institutions after exhausting their eligibility and walking out without a degree and creating opportunities and value for themselves with what a degree can bring. I worry that, with the transfer legislation now and immediate eligibility, that could become a problem for us 4 or 5 years from now. And so, it's on us to make sure that we legislate that properly. Obviously the idea of guys being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness, it just makes sense. It's I think, long overdue. Now, what comes with that in terms of the agents and the expectations and different things like that as it relates to mental health and your I guess your ability to focus on what's most important.
Just another thing that could steer, like another distraction, potential. Like I think about it, and even, kids coming off the court this year, and they're looking at their phones, trying to see if they got an NIL deal after they got 30 points in a game or something like that. I worry about some of the little things.
Yeah, and again, I think probably the lion's share of it is good. Yeah. But you worry, at least I do worry about the unintended consequences that could come out of it. So, I think it's like anything else. We have to be prepared as the adults in the room to say, okay, hey, here's how we need to modify this to make sure that we're not making it worse for the next generation or the next line of coaches to come after or the next line of players to come after these, that the game remains healthy, that college athletics keeps the principles that have made it, really, really beneficial to not just football, basketball athletes, but, your women's sports, your other sports that may not get the notoriety that we get, that they can still have a platform to create opportunities for, all the student athletes across the board.
Looking back, flipping back to your team now, what's your biggest concern with this group?
Biggest concern with this group, I think I don't know that I know it yet. My approach is really, to try to take it day by day, week by week, and see, where we are and where we need to be moving, and then address it from there. I like our group. I like the makeup of the character of our guys. I said this a couple of years ago when we had a really good team that, they care about each other. They value each other. And so I think when you have that, then not to say you're not going to have adversity and stuff that comes up, but it seems like it's a lot easier to manage when you have guys that genuinely like each other, they enjoy being around each other, and we have that.
I still say, by the way, you're a part of the greatest coaching staff I've ever been around in doing this.
We had a good group. You're talking about the Florida group?
Oh, my God. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Billy, you, Shiat, Donnie.
Yeah. We had some really good guys.
Pelfrey. Yeah, and Pell.
Yeah. I like our group that we have here too. This is a really fun group to be around. Some really good guys.
What's your greatest memory? I'll leave you on this. From that Florida group, from that ride that you guys had, because that was not only as a coaching staff, you had some personalities on that one in particular, in Joe.
Yeah, I would say for me, it kind of flows really from the beginning. I was there 10 years, so when I look at it, I look at the journey, from where we walked in and, one of the youngest staffs in the country, and, Billy taking over a program that had had pockets of success and really hadn't been able to sustain it. And, then you bring in a Brent Wright and a Major Parker, and those guys kind of laid the foundation, and then you get a Udonis Haslem, a Teddy Dupay, and then a Mike Miller comes along, and he says at the time, everybody's saying, hey, why Florida now? And Mike was a top 10 player in the country. He says, my goal is by the time I leave, they're going to be saying, why not Florida? And then you get Donnell Harvey, and then, that crew, Justin Hamilton, and all those guys that came. And those guys, to me, paved the way for what, Joe Kim and Al and Corey and Torian and Lee Humphrey and that crew was able to do. So to me, when I look back on it, it's like, the family, the journey, the process of doing what they did to become back-to-back national champions, and I'll say this, I don't think enough credit is given to what Billy was able to do, taking a team that was unranked going into that 2005, 2006 season and winning the national championship, and then coming back and taking a team that was ranked number one with all the expectations and then doing it again. So not only just back-to-back, but the process of going from a team that nobody thought would be any good to winning it all. And then with all the expectations to be able to do it again, that's unheard of.
He was great at getting to guys, right? Like that's, and you learn that from him, a lot of it from him, of focus and, I don't know if pushing the right buttons is the word, but just finding ways to kind of, get guys. I mean, I always remember, what was his saying about the media? Poison? Something about poison, right? He loved that one. Yeah. But yeah, he has a great way about him. And I think, I think you have the same thing where, again, no BS. You're old school in a lot of ways, right? No BS. You're not going to compromise your values, your integrity. But these days, you gotta also adapt.
Yeah. I think that's the whole key. And he was great at it. And we try to make sure we're putting our guys in position to have success. So work in progress.
Well, listen, great being here. Great seeing you in person.
Good to see you, Brian.
Heck of a lot better doing this at Dayton than over Zoom. So
Awesome. Always a pleasure.